Hi, and welcome to ECCB Connects. ECCB Connects is a production of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, where we share with you who we are, what we do, and how we serve you. Have you ever heard about anti-money laundering? Do you think it affects you? Well, this week we speak with Deputy Director in the Financial Sector Supervision Department at the ECCB, Livia Bertin-Mark, as she explains the concept of money laundering and its related activities, links it to our banking system, and explains how monitoring these activities helps to keep our banking system safe. Stay with us, we'll share more with you after this message.
ECCB Connects is the official handle of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. How do you know it's the ECCB? All posts and reactions made by the ECCB on social media will carry the username ECCB Connects and feature this profile picture. Other pages with the name Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, such as these, are not official pages. Like, subscribe, and follow us today. You'll know it's the ECCB by this profile pic and the handle at ECCB Connects.
Livia, welcome to ECCB Connects.
And thank you for having me.
Now, money laundering is a term that some of us may have heard about. When I think about it, I think about the movement of funds for illegal activities or some criminal link to money. You are a professional working in this field. Explain to us, if you will, what is money laundering?
The term money laundering is actually where funds have been obtained through illegal activity, and it's the process of passing those illegal funds through the system so that they appear legitimate. And so there are various stages that happen in money laundering, such as the placement of those funds, the layering of the funds, that is by doing certain transactions, and the integration of those funds into the system. And so once they are now integrated into the system, they appear as clean funds, and hence the term, they have now been laundered.
Or
if
washed.
you want to, they've been washed.
So for example, I've stolen some money, and now I need to make that money appear legitimate. I go through a process of trying to get it into a bank and then conducting a number of transactions so that it comes off as if it's legitimate money.
That would be correct. So this is a fairly simple example of what money laundering can look like. So funds have been derived from an illegal activity, that being the offense of robbery. And so you then come to the financial system through a bank and you deposit that money into your bank account. And from those funds, you may want to then pass those funds on to a friend of yours, a colleague of yours, and make a deposit in their account. Or you may want to then purchase something with perhaps a manager's checks from one of the financial institutions. And so by the time it gets to the point where you're being issued a manager's check, it looks like legitimate funds that have been gained by you.
I see. And along with money laundering, there are some other terms, letters I would like to call, that are being thrown around. So there's AML, there's CFT. Break down those other terminologies that are linked to this area.
So the next term I think we would want to focus on is that of TF, and that is terrorist financing. And terrorist financing is the financing or the funding or the support of terrorism activity. And so whereas money laundering are funds that are derived from illegal activity, terrorist financing can be from legitimate sources of fund, but it is used to sponsor and support terrorist activity. And there's also a new term called proliferation financing. And proliferation financing deals with the funding and the support of weapons of mass destruction, which are often used from time to time in terrorist activities.
Now, I can see money laundering definitely as a more easy example for persons to grasp. But these other activities you've spoken about, the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, getting funding for that, and then terrorism financing. Why are these activities and monitoring those activities important for us as a region?
Well, it's critical for us as a region because we do not operate in a silo as a currency union. We integrate on a global scale and we do business with other countries. And so, whereas what our member countries have done is assess their exposure to both money laundering, terrorist financing, and proliferation financing, perhaps the risk of terrorist financing and proliferation might be low based on the assessment. Notwithstanding, there is always the risk that the system can be utilized to fund those activities in other countries through our banking system.
Now, how does the ECCB fit into this whole system of money laundering, monitoring it, and making sure that the financial system is safe?
So in 2016, the Monetary Council would have taken the decision for the ECCB to assume supervisory powers for AML, CFT, and now CPF of its licensed financial institutions under the Banking Act 2015. Now, you would recognize in the beginning we spoke about MLTF and PF. AML, CFT, CPF, which is anti-money laundering, countering the financing of terrorism and proliferation financing, is the suite of legislation and rules and guidance that have been issued to mitigate the risk of money laundering, terrorist financing, and now proliferation financing. ECCB, as a supervisory, is but one of the competent authorities that have now been granted the authority to ensure that adequate systems are in place by our financial institutions, that they are not facilitating transactions for bad actors. And so persons who may attempt to place funds that are gained from illicit activity would not be able to succeed because of the systems that have been put in place.
And you said competent, ECCB is one of the competent authorities, so there are other authorities throughout the financial system who also monitor and mitigate these risks?
There are other competent authorities, and in some of our member countries, that being of the Financial Intelligence Units or the Financial Intelligence Authority, and it is together that we make the system effective, and I guess, if you want to put it that way, a disincentive for bad actors to want to participate in.
I think of it as a set of superheroes coming together to ensure the safety of the financial system. Now, as a customer coming into a bank, because this topic may seem somewhat abstract, it's out there, terrorism is not something that, is really familiar in our region or something that we see happening every day. But if I go into a bank, what are some of the signs or what are some of the examples I can expect to see that my bank is actually enforcing or has these systems in place to guard against money laundering and financing terrorism?
So one of the key things I think most customers walking into a bank would notice is the information that our banks gather on us, that being the KYC, know your customer. And so they would, at the beginning of a relationship, seek certain information from you as a customer. And the purpose of this information is to understand what is the nature of your transactions and what can be considered to be a normal pattern of behavior for you, Karina. So if it is at somewhere down the line during the banking relationship, there is something that is considered to be unusual. So all of a sudden you're coming with a very large sum of money to make a deposit. That would then trigger the bank to ask you some additional questions. And you being the customer would provide that. And so this is where you see the system starting to work. They gather information. This is based on what national legislation requires of them. But they also monitor you as a customer to ensure that, well, what you're doing is in keeping with what you have deemed to be your normal pattern of behavior.
So it is not that, because people have that concern, sometimes annoyance that the bank is asking all these questions, it's my money, they should be happy that I'm bringing my deposits here, but it's actually for our safety and the safety of the banking system.
Indeed it is, because one of the things, the ECCB has responsibility for financial stability in our region. But key to financial stability is maintaining the integrity of the banking system. And when we speak about integrity, we speak about the reputational risk. And what you would not want is to know that one of the bank, your very bank that you're doing business with, has been associated with criminal activity. And so hence the reason why these mechanisms have been put in place to ensure that we are compliant, not only as financial institutions, but we are compliant as member countries.
If you will, as a final question, what are some of the ways that we see this monitoring of anti-money laundering activities and the financing of terrorism? How do we see it demonstrated in our banking system?
This redounds to the people in a very real way, in a very tangible way, based on how we're able to transact business, not only within our member countries and amongst the ECCU member countries, but globally. Correspondent banking is one of those areas I think is necessary to highlight this. We use our correspondent banks to transfer funds and make it easy for us to do business on a global scale, for us to trade. Right. Without those anti-money laundering, countering the financing of terrorism and proliferation financing rules and regulations that seek to ensure jurisdictional compliance, it would be difficult for us to facilitate those transactions. Why? Our countries would be risk-rated as high-risk jurisdictions to do business with. This would impact our citizens as well. You would not be able to do it with ease. You would be asked quite a bit of questions if you have to do a transaction, or you may have to facilitate it by using other means as well, which is something we would not want to encourage in our system. As a result, it is important for us as a supervisory body to ensure that we have robust systems in place, that being our legislation, but more so our supervisory framework is robust and compliant with what international best practices require of us, to ensure that the system works for everybody, and as the governor would say, except the bad actors.
Livia, thank you so much for speaking with us on ECCB Connects.
Thank you for having me.
And now for this week's financial tip.
Develop a budget. A good place to start when setting your financial goals is to look at your budget. What is a budget, you may ask? Simply put, a budget is a plan that shows you how you're going to allocate your weekly or monthly income to meet your financial obligations and have money set aside for savings. The budget gives you a clear picture on what you have to spend and how it is to be spent.
Here is where we end this week's episode of ECCB Connects, where we've been speaking with Deputy Director in the Financial Sector Supervision Department, Livia Bertin-Mark. She explained the concepts of anti-money laundering and countering terrorism and proliferation financing. She shared that the ECCB is one of the competent authorities responsible for monitoring these activities on a regional level to ensure the integrity of our financial sector. By monitoring these activities, we help to maintain the stability of the banking system and allows you as a customer to carry out transactions safely. For more information about anti-money laundering and how the ECCB is working to maintain the safety of our banking system, be sure to visit our website. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure to join us next week when we bring you another episode of ECCB Connects.